As the clock struck midnight, Jake found himself on a desolate stretch of highway, surrounded by darkness. The road ahead seemed endless, with only his car's headlights piercing the inky blackness. Rain drummed on the windshield, creating an eerie symphony that matched his growing Onisa. Jake had heard stories about this road, tales of eerie encounters with phantom hitchhikers. But he dismissed them as mere urban legends, the product of overactive imaginations. He was a rational man after all, and he scoffed at the idea of ghosts. Just as he was lost in thought, he spotted a figure on the side of the road. It was a woman, drenched and shivering, her thumb outstretched, seeking a ride. Against his better judgment, Jake pulled over. The woman's wet clothes clung to her, and her face was obscured by long, dripping hair. She climbed into the back seat without a word. "Where are you headed?" Jake asked, his voice quivering slightly. No response. The woman just sat there, her hair concealing her face and water puddling on the floor of the car. Jake could feel a shiver run down his spine. After what felt like an eternity, the silence was broken by a voice that sent chills through Jake's veins. It was the woman, her voice cold and hollow, as though it echoed from the depths of the grave. "Take me to the bridge," she whispered. Jake's heart raced. He knew the stories, the legends that spoke of a ghostly hitchhiker who asked to be taken to the bridge where she died. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. But something compelled him to obey, to follow her instructions. As they approached the bridge, the woman's hair slowly began to part, revealing her face. It was a face of unimaginable horror, a visage of death itself. Her eyes were empty sockets, her skin a sickly shade of pale blue. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he realized he was in the presence of something not of this world. With a sudden bone-chilling laugh, the woman vanished from the back seat, leaving behind nothing but a cold, damp seat and the stench of death. Jake sped away from the bridge, heart pounding, vowing never to return to that accursed road. For Lisa, driving at night had always been an unsettling experience. The darkness seemed to swallow the world, and the isolation of the empty road weighed on her mind. But she had never imagined a night like this one. As she navigated the winding mountain road, her headlights illuminated the thick forest that surrounded her. The rain poured down in torrents, making the road slick and treacherous. Lisa's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel, her heart racing. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, bright and blinding. The car behind her was tailgating dangerously close, its headlights piercing through the rain and fog. Lisa tried to speed up, to put some distance between her and the aggressive driver, but the car stayed right on her tail. Panic set in as Lisa realized she was on a deserted road with no place to turn. She fumbled for her phone to call for help, but found it had no signal. The headlights behind her seemed to grow brighter, and the car drew dangerously close. Desperate, Lisa took a sharp turn onto a narrow side road, hoping to lose her pursuer. But the car followed, its headlights still blindingly bright. She could see nothing of the driver behind the dazzling glare. With her heart in her throat, Lisa sped up, pushing her car to its limits. The headlights stayed with her, never wavering. She felt trapped, hunted. As she rounded a bend, Lisa's car skidded on the wet road, careening toward the edge of a cliff. She screamed, her tires screeching, but at the last moment, the headlights behind her vanished. Her car came to a stop just inches from the precipice. Lisa sat there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. She had narrowly escaped disaster, but she knew that what had pursued her was no ordinary driver. It was a phantom presence, a malevolent force that sought to drive her to her doom. The radio station of the damned David had always been a night owl, and he loved nothing more than driving in the dead of night, the radio providing the soundtrack to his solitary journeys. But tonight, as he tuned the dial, he stumbled upon a station unlike any he had ever encountered. The station emitted an eerie, static-laden signal, but beneath the crackling interference, David could hear the faint strains of haunting music. It was a tune he had never heard before, mournful and unsettling. He couldn't resist the strange allure of the mysterious broadcast. As he continued to listen, the static seemed to coalesce into whispered voices, indistinct and ghostly. They spoke in hushed tones, their words filled with a sense of foreboding. David strained to make out what they were saying, but the words slipped through his grasp like smoke. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity, and the landscape outside grew increasingly surreal. The trees appeared twisted and contorted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate landscape. The voices on the radio grew louder, their tone more urgent. David could feel a growing sense of dread creeping over him. He tried to change the station, but his fingers seemed frozen in place, unable to move. Suddenly, the voices on the radio stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. David's heart pounded in his chest as he looked in the rearview mirror and saw a figure sitting in the back seat of his car. It was a shadowy, indistinct presence, its eyes glowing with malevolence. With a jolt of terror, David swerved his car off the road and into a ditch. The world spun around him, and he felt himself losing consciousness. As his vision faded, he heard the voices on the radio return, their words clearer now. "Welcome to our station," they whispered. "You're one of us now." And with those chilling words, David knew that he had become a permanent resident of the radio station of the damned, forever lost in the nightmarish world between the living and the dead.